thank you, library, Yvette, Joanna, and you all for coming out at nighttime. It's nighttime now to Southampton. We are giving a talk on this event that only happens every 250 years, and Pluto changing signs. So, and we are in this time period now of the transition from Pluto changing from one sign to the next, which is it does happen. It only happens between a Capricorn and Aquarius every 250 years. So we're going to look back on the times that it happened before, 250 years ago and 500 years ago, and see what was happening in history and see what we can figure out might be happening now. So because this transition, we are in the middle of it. It started on March 23rd when Pluto entered Aquarius. And Pluto goes backwards to Capricorn, back to Aquarius, back Capricorn, back Aquarius. The transitional period are generally very disruptive because there is such a cultural change occurring that there seems to be a little bit of chaos occurring because the one pattern is trying to die from Pluto and Capricorn, and the other one is not quite born yet. So these times take up both patterns. You know, both things are happening at the same time. So it makes it, our times especially chaotic, if you will. So I just wanted to point out here what was happening when one planet moves from one sign to the next. This is obviously not realistic, but it does show the sun as the center of our solar system with Mercury, then with Venus, and then with Earth, or then Mars, and then Venus. It's the pattern is correct. You know, the rhythm is correct. There's the farther out you go, we only see after Jupiter and Saturn is the last planet you see in the sky. But you have these other ones outside, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that we can't see. But they are affecting us. We're all one cosmos. But what we're seeing here is that the planets orbit around the sun in their different spans of time. Mercury is very quick and moves around the sun in more than a year. It takes less than a year for Mercury to move around his orbit around the sun. The moon obviously goes around the Earth once a month. Venus goes around about a year. But we have planets that are outside we're visible, outside our visible scene. We see Saturn at night sometimes. But you have these Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, particularly, they take much longer time to go around the sun. Their orbits around the sun are much longer. So, but they're all of the planets in our solar system are against the backdrop of the 12 signs. So that does not change. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, they move. They stay the same, but the planets are orbiting. When we say, for instance, Pluto is in Capricorn, we're saying that Pluto is in front of part of the constellation Capricorn. So this was a moment in time, the fall equinox of 2012. And Pluto was there just in the beginning of Capricorn at that time. Now we're talking about Pluto having moved through the rest of Capricorn and going into Aquarius. You know, Neptune has left the beginning of Pisces and more towards the end of Pisces. Uranus is finished with Aries and has moved on to Taurus. So I just wanted to give you a sense that that's what we're saying. When we use, astrologers use language, and they say, my Venus is in Aries, for instance. I'm giving you a sense here that would say that Venus is in front of Aries from the Earth's perspective, okay? Because we have to go by the Earth's perspective. Nobody is out in space looking at what's going on. So we use those terminologies a lot in astrology. My sun is in Gemini, my moon is in Libra. But that's what we're saying, from the Earth's perspective, against the backdrop of the 12 zodiacal signs, which keep their regularity. They're our theatrical background of everything on the Earth that happens. So, but that's what we're saying. And so this is just one moment in time, and that's all we're doing all the time, is just one moment in time. So I wanted to talk a little bit, for the agenda for this talk is about Pluto, about Capricorn, about Aquarius, what happened before, as I said, the 250 years before, and also the 500 years before, and then most recently. And perhaps we can have clues as to what to happen next. Now, keep in mind that this transition doesn't end until November 19th, 2024. It's a whole other year away, when Pluto will actually leave Capricorn for good and stay in Aquarius for good for the next 20 years. And another concept that's important in astrology is to remember that each sign has a corrective function from the sign before. So, and what happens with these changes between Capricorn and Aquarius, for instance, but any two adjacent signs, a planet will move from one sign to the next. But there's always some point, each sign change points to entirely new and perhaps unfamiliar way of expressing the planet. And the new sign, and there's a cultural shock that occurs at the transition, and that is part of what we're experiencing now. This culture shock between the changing of the signs, Pluto transitioning to a new sign, but not kept completely out of the sign, the previous sign. So about Pluto, we're going to explore a little bit about Pluto now, what that means. And although Pluto was discovered, in 1930, it has been a part of Greek mythology and mythology for centuries, thousands of years. So this is a picture of the Hades in Hades, and Persephone's in Hades, and Demeter finally has a reunion with her daughter. Hades took Persephone down into the underworld, and Demeter then gave winter to the earth. Nothing grew, and then they reunited, and we got spring again. You learn a lot about astrology by studying the Greek myths. But in ancient Greek religion, Pluto was the ruler of the Greek underworld, and the earlier name for Pluto was Hades, and it became the name of the underworld itself. So Pluto was the Greek god of wealth, because what was underneath the earth, the minerals, was valuable, because we were agrarian, we had to feed ourselves, and so the earth was very important. You put a seed in the ground, and the seed has to be nurtured to become into a plant and to become into food. So the necessity, the earth, what was underground, was very important for the bountiful harvest, and as I said, to eat. So in astrology, this is from Wikipedia. I edited it a little bit. Should have been edited more, but Wikipedia is never been known to be famous for advocating astrology or that point of view. But anyway, they say it's called the Great Renewer, and is considered to represent the aspect of nature that destroys. Destruction happens, and then by bringing up previously buried intense needs and drives to the surface and expressing them, even at the expense of the existing order, and renewal occurs. So, when your Pluto is someplace, your moon is someplace, and when you have a transit of Pluto over your moon, or your sun or something, we all get that in our lives. It will be experience of a death and a resurrection experience. It could be the death of someone that you love, the ending of something, a traumatic experience. Something never goes back to the way it was, but something does rise out of the surface. And this is important to understand when we're at our darkest moments and we see that nothing but annihilation is occurring. There is a mechanism in the human soul, I think, to say, okay, well, something's going to resurrect again. There's got to be some reason for this. So Pluto is also associated with absolutes, with power, extremities, transformations, incredible feats, mass movements, and the need to cooperate with others. Pluto governs major business and enormous wealth, mining, surgery, and detective work, any enterprise that involves digging under the surface to bring the truth to light. And that's a really important concept for Pluto. What Pluto is, what sign it's going through, is we're going to be expected to see evidence of things arising out of the surface, arriving from nowhere, underground, and getting exposed, and the truth of the situation comes to light. As I say, Pluto was discovered in 1930, but it was been there all the time. It's just that when a planet gets discovered, there is a certain acceleration of the energy of the planet that occurs. This is just to let you, I don't think you can even see, maybe on the edge of the screen there, that's Pluto, how small Pluto is. This is obviously just the proportional sizes of the planets. Here's the Sun, Mercury, Mars, Earth, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, the biggest. These are gas planets, Uranus, Neptune, and baby Pluto. Just to show you, in the ancient world, Jupiter and Saturn were the big chronicles of time. We use them, we still use them to some extent, because these three, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, we can't see. But if you actually did history with astrology, and like we do with Pluto, what was arising in our culture when Uranus was discovered, when Neptune was discovered, is fascinating read. We're going to go into a little bit about what was happening when Pluto was discovered, was happening in, and this is what this slide is about, what was arising when Pluto was discovered in 1930 on the Earth. So it coincides with the emergence of the talking cure in psychiatric treatment, which focuses on bringing repressed content to the consciousness. Just like we were talking about, Pluto has to bring something out. When you have a really good therapeutic session with somebody, there's been something that has come out of your unconscious, and you look at it, and then you can release it, heal the trauma, or carry it on and have an aha experience. There's something comes out of the dark and comes to light. And this came about, around 1930, as did other kind of more darker points of view. From here, the Hays Code in Hollywood. If you look at movies before 1930, you'll see the dress code, the dresses, those beautiful silk dresses they had on. Those women had no underwear on. There were all kinds of sex things happening. If you go to TCM and see movies before 1930, it's a different thing than at 1930, because the codes came into Hollywood. You couldn't show certain things. You remember the codes? It happened one night. You had the Clark Gable and is it Myrna Loy? Claudette Colbert couldn't be in the same bed, right? They had to be in separate beds. There was all this kind of strictures, but those strictures came in at the same time Pluto was discovered. We had the Depression. This is an iconic photo of the Depression, 1930. The market crashed at 29, and then there were all the Dust Bowl and Grapes of Wrath, the very, very dark times, really, 1930, around that 30. This is the Phantom. It's a shadow fictional magazine character that became really adopted, with Orson Welles, all over the place. It became this dark character. The shadow comes out of nowhere, and this lurking, what's happening. These are very Plutonian images. And then we also naturally had the rise of fascism in Europe, which was a very, dark, controlling. Pluto controls, power gets amassed in one centralized vehicle, whatever it is, political or cultural. But we also have this march, Gandhi's march, the Salt March. They walked hundreds of miles to protest. They threw the salt in the sea because they got tired of the English rule in India. This was around that same time. It took them a while to actually procure that. But also the first unofficial board of directors meeting of the Bank of International Settlements was in Basel, Switzerland, during April of 1930. It's the oldest international financial institution, plays a key role in global economy. There are now 63 banks, 76 other non-governmental agencies, regulatory agencies, including WHO, IMF, World Bank, WEF, all operating with sovereign immunity. That means there is nobody watching over these group of Bank of International Settlements. It's a bank that makes the transaction between all the other banks in the world. This bank does it. It's held in secret. There's no overarching, regulatory commission about watching what they're doing. It's this really amassing of great power in this group of people, and this is their first meeting. It was April of 1930 when we had Pluto was arising. The Plutonian, the wealth, the god of wealth became visible in the sky, and you had all these events happening on Earth, which really symbolize a great deal of Pluto's power and what his purview is. Pluto and power. This is just a quick little photo of harnessing an ox and making, harnessing the power and then turning straps to make water. The water is moving from one place to another. And astrologer Maurice Fernandez says that power comes from the ability to make choices. The more decisions and choices you make in life, the more power you have. And it's an interesting concept. I didn't actually think about it myself, but it's staying with me to kind of think about that, about power. Where does power come from? Do I have power? How much power do I have? Do I give over my power to somebody else? Or do I make decisions for myself? You know, it's an interesting concept that maybe needs further reflection, at least on my part. So what else does Pluto signify? Hades or Pluto is the image which we talked about. Inevitable changes in life which always contain endings and beginnings. Acknowledge that something has died. At the same time, a new phase of life is being born. This is a picture of the tarot card of death, and you can see here comes death. And the king down here, he's lost his crown, you know, he has to succumb to death. The archbishop is trying to plead with death, but nobody escapes death. But there's the sun on the background there. There's a new sun arising in the back. There's something that's going to be born when this element that's no longer viable has died. And this is just a quick little things to, here again we have the orbits of the planets around the sun, and we have here the very elliptical, strange orbit of Pluto. It doesn't look like anybody else. It changed, you know, any other planet has a much more regular orbit, but Pluto makes these wide, long, elliptical swatches. It stays in one sign longer than another. And between 17, and I'd like to do some research on this, between February 1979 and February of 99, Pluto was inside Neptune's orbit. Doesn't happen to any other planet. They change their orbit except Pluto. Becomes closer to the Earth. So Pluto's orbit around the sun takes 248 years. His whole orbit to come back to where he was, you know, originally. In the United States' chart, Pluto is at 27 degrees in Capricorn, and that's part of what's happening in the United States is that Pluto is now at 27 degree Capricorn, 28, 29, has moved, it has revolved around the sun to back to a spot that the United States his own Pluto was in natal in the July 4th, 1776 chart. Pluto is at 27 degrees of Capricorn, and it's there now these years. Now individuals are not going to have a Pluto return. You have to live to 248 years, but empires have. I think I gave a talk on this before. Empires have it. English empires had the Pluto return, and what happens when the Pluto, the planet of power, comes back to the natal position. This is another thing that Maurice says, that our appetite and intensity for whatever sign Pluto is passing through increases. We become obsessed, we become ferocious. Obsession is a really good term for Pluto. We get obsessed at something. We can't stop it. When you fall in love with something and somebody or something, you get obsessed with it. Your mind keeps thinking about it. That's an obsession. That's a Pluto driving you into some hunger that you're trying to satisfy. That often has to do with larger than normal life experiences. If you fall in love with your mate, your life mate, for instance, you have a Plutonian love experience. This person totally changed my life. Doesn't happen every day, maybe to you, but definitely not to me. So maybe there are people here who have the Pluto in Cancer, born 1912 to 1939. Anybody here? Okay. So this is a very unique generation. You were born with Pluto in a sign, as I say. Pluto's not in Cancer now. It's in Capricorn. It's opposite sign. But you and some of us do experience Pluto opposite its natal sign, which is what you're experiencing now. But this generation called the silent generation, or the greatest generation. And here is a picture. Cancer is the home. It's a mother. It's taking care of the homeland. It's emotional needs. And in Pluto, it's also boundaries. It's also countries. Nationalism. You know, we had the First World War here. And all the boundaries, I had to fight for my homeland. And disruption, because Pluto will bring disruption. And here you have the women who should be at home taking care of the household, making weapons. This is during World War I in Britain, arms production. So contribution, tenacity, and emotional sensitivity is Cancer's role here. Now Pluto in Leo, I'm sure there's plenty of boomers here, myself among them, baby boomers born 39 to 57. And the Pluto in Leo generation. Obsession here to be noticed and appreciated, to shine, because Leo is the sign of August. We have to shine. We're individuals. See me, see me. This whole huge generation that happen to be part of. Contribution, individualism, and creative expression. Mistake, you can be Leo too proud, glamour-seeking, demonstrative. Leo's a little dramatic sign. Pluto gets obsessive about the drama. Warning, you can read these on your own, I think, that national pride, big business, terrorism, dictators. 39, 40, this is the World War II. It's the post-war. In the 50s, this was a huge boom for the United States and the world after World War II occurred. The 50s were an enormous growth period in this country. For some people. Pluto in Virgo is the next generation. Are there any early Gen X's, 56 to 72? Okay, you're born in Pluto in Virgo. And this is the generation that really lived through or experiences the big cultural shift in the 60s. You might have been young, but you embody the 60s. It was just a phase that we went through, but the Pluto in Virgo generation have it deep down, the wanting to decide what's important. Virgo is integrity, and I'm doing this is what I really feel, and what is important with Virgo. Virgo is the virgin, and it's the wheat in the chaff, and when you harvest, you have to make sure that you don't destroy the gem of the wheat chaff, then you discard the cusp that you can't use. So there's a Gemini discriminating element to Virgo. It's a Gemini that's Virgo, but discriminating element in Virgo. Perfectionism and down-to-earth attitude, hardworking, self-improving. Despairs as the cost of achievements. I might be overwhelmed there or something. See, enrichment, you can read that. I don't have to read, it's boring, right? Read that if you're interested. Pluto in Libra. Pluto in Libra generation, the generation Y, 72 to 84. Anybody here 72 to 84? Mm-hmm. Pluto in Libra is a beautiful sign. They want balance, they want social justice, they want harmony. So and about relationships, this generation is probably one that is open to different kinds of relationships. Male, baby, male, male, female, female, because they're experimenting with different couples of people cooperation and harmony, symmetry, agreement, finding a common ground, cooperating. So they'll cause that. They'll be obsessed with that, Pluto, because Pluto brings your obsession. You'll be obsessed with that, whatever sign Pluto is in. Pluto in Scorpio, this is 83 to 95. Anybody Pluto in Scorpio? Okay. Very intense group of people, because Pluto is one of the rulers of Scorpio as well as Mars, and that's the millennials. This is exploring sexuality, embracing their identity, learning about all things occult and taboo, and about secrets, and not afraid to go dark and have secrets. Obsession can be taboos, facing what is scary, the ability to really look at the dark side, look at the shadow side, making collective issues conscious. They can feel isolated and hopeless at times. Victim mentality can, lead to damaging, because Scorpio can be a sign that will kill. It's an animal. All the signs have an animal token that belongs to them, and Scorpio is the scorpion, the bug. It's the only animal that can kill itself with its own tail. So scorpions have this intense passion, but they have to be careful that they don't do things that are detrimental and self-destructive to themselves. Sexual revolution during that time, 84 to 95. Pluto in Sagittarius, these were the truth seekers born 95 to 2008. It's pretty young if you're pretty young if you're born there. Well, yeah, 25. But truth seeker, this is when the internet got really going and we had the globalism, because Sagittarius likes to look outside its normal purview. It likes to look beyond. What's the meaning of my life? What other cultures, what religions am I going to explore? They get obsessed about finding their meaning and keeping searching for the meaning in their life. So this freedom, Sagittarius likes their freedom. Freedom, exploration, optimism, overextension, because you can, take too much cake. Sagittarius is too much, and Pluto is obsession about too much cultural globalism, not enough individual, right here and now, too much out there in the world. Immigration was a big topic in those years as well, because that was people coming from the outside. So here we're up to Pluto in Capricorn, which was started in January 27, 2008. It entered Capricorn for the first time in 248 years. And Pluto, the combination of Pluto-Capricorn, which is what we're going to explore now, what we've gone through the past 20 years, since 2008, has given rise. Capricorn is institutionally, they're very connected with society and the institutions of society. They want to build something big, and Pluto makes them obsessive about building some structure, some financial structure. Capricorn is an earth sign. And we've seen this. We'll talk about this again. And this is Aquarius. Pluto entered Aquarius on March 23rd, actually, 2023. But Aquarius is a whole different element. Capricorn is an earth sign, and Aquarius is an air sign. And that's one of the problems that we're seeing in the cultural shift, the transition, because it's no longer about building up the assets in the financial world. It's really about coming together in a different kind of social communication, not a top-down one. We'll talk about that. But Aquarians, this is Queen Elizabeth, she was born in Pluto in 0 degrees of Aquarius, will help us not only to see the flaws in ourselves and seek to change them, but we will see the flaws in humanity and seek to change those as well. Aquarius is a very humanitarian sign. As I said before, each sign has a corrective function to the previous sign. When I don't even say, I think I mentioned that before. So these are these transitional times. March 24th to December 19th. See, they're adjacent signs. You have the Capricorn, the sea goat there, and then you have Aquarius. This is the earth sign and water sign. This is he's a water carrier, but he's an air sign. He's a human being, and he's splitting out his ideas. It's all about ideas with Aquarius. It's all about building material structures. I want my gold in my bank with Capricorn. I built enough up. I want to make sure I have something solid. But Aquarius is about dispersing. It's about ideas. So the swinging back and forth between one and the other, which we're experiencing now with the planet Pluto, is why we're having one of the difficulties now. And this is the last slide on Pluto. Is an archetype represents the principle of transformation, power, and primordial instincts associated with the mythical seabird, the phoenix, in that a new life is born from the ashes of the old. That's just that important concept, that nothing is dead. There's something that resurrects. It's important to understand that transformations occur in our own personal lives, culturally, politically, socially, all which ways. This is one thing about the Capricorn. Did I skip? But anyway, Pluto's about power and holds it. This is an article from 1900 about the capitalistic system, because this is a thing for Capricorns, There's one guy at the top, just like there's a pope at the top, a president at the top, a dictator at the top, there's a head of a corporation at the top, and all the little guys are holding up the whole cake, the ones that get the least amount. This is a kind of a structure for Capricorn. And this is a, I don't think that's right, it's all right, I go back there. This is just a Saturn. This is from the Mid-East. It's just a mosaic on a wall, and it talks about the Capricorn moving into Aquarius because they're adjacent signs, and Saturn knows both. Just a little pretty thing to look at. So Aquarius is a fixed sign when winter is fully entrenched. Capricorn starts the season, it's Earth sign. Capricorn begins at the winter solstice. But Aquarius is a fixed sign, it's the next sign, it's an air sign. It's a whole different energy. It's a whole different element and energy. And as I said, Aquarius is the water barrier and he's spilling out his ideas. So Aquarians are rebellious about what's happened before, but can be stubbornly progressive. There's a stubbornness to Aquarius, which we're going to argue evidenced in the next 20 years. Inventive, spontaneous, forward-thinking, and original. They're scientifically and technology-minded. That's in Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign, and we're seeing certainly that. We had Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries in Aquarius in December of 2019. December 2020. They are scientifically and technology-minded, appearing aloof and detached with less of a need for personal ego satisfaction. In Aquarius, they see everybody as equal. There's a very detached sense of Aquarians. Anybody's an Aquarian here? Yeah. You want your fellow, yes, Carla. Yes, you want to see everybody as equal. You want to see the group has to get well. The group, humanity has to get well. Everybody has to do well. There's an equality here, which does not occur in the Capricorn constellation. So, I like to be part of a group of like-minded people that can be androgynous. You see all this androgyny around, and that's part of the Aquarian. It's not like, energy, you don't mind someone is doing something different than I am. It's not like you're tied to your mother's apron strings and you're doing everything in the same way that she did. There's something that's rebellious streak in Aquarians, but they can be stubborn too, which is. So this is William Butler Yeats was a Aquarian, and he loves friends and strangers, and everybody's a friend. And this is about the innovative and the technology part of Aquarius. It's a cute little thing from Yoga Journal. She said, imagine what it's like having a bunch of radio stations on at the same time in your mind. This is the life of an Aquarian, feeling the world in all ways and picking up on the collective mood. I think that's a very good analogy of what it is if you're an Aquarius. And we all have Aquarius someplace in your charts. You all could have Aquarius rising, you could have Moon Aquarius. We're all made up of all 12 signs. Some of them are stronger than others. But all of the planets orbit around the sun. That means they hit all of the signs in their respective time spans. So we all experience all of the signs. So it's important. You might, if you strongly relate to one of them, you're obviously, that has a stronger influence in you in this lifetime. There's no limit. So these solutions to the problems, the mind, the energy of an Aquarian, because it's air, it's not seen. In Capricorn mentality, the earth, you want to see the gold piling up in your garage. But in Aquarius, you don't see it. It's all in the air. Here again, I've mentioned this, corrective function. So this is the analogy, a little picture of the ladder. Capricorn is a ladder, someone at the top and there's people at the bottom. And Capricorn wants to go up. It's a goat. The goat going up to every step it takes, it makes sure it's got sure-footed. It won't take the next step until it's in there, that it's secure, and then it'll take the next step up and up and up. But in Aquarius, it's more like a web. It's more like the intermingling of all the ideas together. It's a whole different concept from what we've been going through with the Capricorn, that up and where are we? If you're on the bottom rung of the ladder, you're nowhere. But in the Aquarian modality, there's more of a chance that you're going to find your group of people that you are connected with, and you'll keep those connections going. And there won't be the sense of the hierarchical. So this is another picture of the differences between these two signs. And this is the problem. What we're going through is because we're changing from one to the other, from this over sense of authoritarian control with the Capricorn, like we saw in the BIS, the Bank of Internet Settlements, and you see in the corporate, and we'll talk about the corporate world. But power is centralized at the top. Nobody in the bottom has power. But now, when moving into Aquarius, awareness of principles, equality, fairness, freedom, coupled with dispersion of new ideas, the good of all humanity. People coming together, all of these, we've had all of these, the rebellions and these pickets and the trucker strike and the UA strike and the film strike and the auto strike and all the strikes in France, and it's just all over the world, the uprisings of the people, uprising. So these are the exact dates, or pretty much, these are orbs here, but this is the Pluto and Capricorn. We'll go quickly through this. I mean, I like history. So this is the 500 years ago. Last time Pluto was in Capricorn, and we had Martin Luther, one lone man, decided he'd had enough with the abuses that the Catholic Church had wrought on the poor people, and whether he actually hammered these 95 theses up on the cathedral walls, we don't know. But in any way, he started a revolution. That was 1517, and just as Pluto was going into Capricorn. And because the printing press had gotten developed during that time, the ideas that he promoted got spread all over Europe rather quickly. And we also had in Henry VIII, annulled his marriage to Anne of Boleyn after 25 years because he didn't have a son. And we also had the institution of slavery beginning in 1517, which is one of the more difficult things that occurred then, more constrictive. But when Pluto came into Aquarius, Henry VIII's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, he started dissolving all the 800 churches and monasteries, and taxes were now paid to the crown and not to the Pope. So Henry VIII took the power that the papal authority had and brought it to himself. He changed the power structure. But he also been dissolving all the churches and monasteries. Thomas Cromwell brought in a lot of social, legal, and economic reforms in England, which is much more Aquarian, rather than the feudal system that was in Europe and England at that time. I mean, I only picked England. You could take other countries, and but this was a huge change with Pluto and Aquarius instead of Pluto and Capricorn, because the Bible was also translated in English. And also this big Copernican revolution also happened with a new technological idea that the Earth was not the center of the universe. The Greeks knew it 500 years before Christ, and earlier than that. But it was only Copernicus in Europe, 1543, that actually took a lifelong study, and he, at a great expense to his own personal life, he made the revolution that the Earth was not the center of the solar system, the sun was. And this is Elizabeth, when she was with her Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is where it is now. She was the first tutor that decided that the people gave her power, not herself. Before, when Henry VIII, he was the power, and she decided, oh no, I'm with you. And that's the Pluto, and my power comes from you. She took the sword and she was the head of her army, and that I have the body of a woman but the soul of a man, and she, the Spanish Armada and all that. But she was really one who really believed that her power came, and she was an outsider. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, her marriage to Henry VIII was annulled. She had to live through how many, 7 other wives of Henry VIII. She was a not wanted child, no parents. She survived that whole torture. It's a wonderful story about her life, Elizabeth's life, until she became queen when Edward died and Mary died, all the other, Henry VIII's other children, legitimate children. But she was an outsider, and she was on the throne when England had its Pluto return, the power. She reigned for over 50 years. And she had an astrologer pick the moment in time that she was going to get coronated, John Dee. It's all famous, and she lived, that's a history proved. It's one of these facts that don't really talk about too much. So here's 1762. I hope you like history, but I'll go through it quickly if you're, but this is 1762 when Pluto was in Capricorn, the end of the French and Indian Wars. George Washington was in that French and Indian Wars, in the British military. He's probably started the French and Indian War because he killed a Frenchman down the Mississippi River someplace when they were fighting off the Indians. So the crown got upset because they were in debt. They'd been supporting the colonists. And so they decided to give the colonists all these control them. This is the Pluto and Capricorn, the control. England wanted to control the colonies. So they had this whole series of acts on the colony, 13 colonies, to try to keep control. And finally there was a Boston Tea Party because the Parliament closed the port. And why did they want to do this? Because they wanted to raise revenue, they wanted to create more effective means of enforcing, and to punish the province, establish precedent that British Parliament had the right to tax colonies. Lord Townsend, who that picture was before, the superiority of the mother country can in no time be better exerted than now. That's a Pluto and Capricorn. I'm at the top and you have to listen to what I say. So, but here comes George Washington in his ragtag. He's crossing the Delaware, December 25, 26, and here comes an outsider. And who would have ever thought that George Washington and his ragtag army could have destroyed the whole British, the biggest fighting force in the world? It was a complete, you know. And if you think about those times, you know, when you lived in the colonies, these 13 colonies, you didn't know, there was no communication. You didn't know what side to be on. You don't know whether to be on the British side or the colonist side. You didn't know what to do. You had armies running through your properties, taking all your goods. It was a chaotic situation in those days. You really didn't know. And most of the people here wanted to stay with Britain. But in January 1776, this is the end of the Capricorn era, Thomas Paine wrote this pamphlet. And he said, "Where is the King of America?" Paine asked. "I'll tell you, friends, so far as we approve of the monarchy in America, the law is the king." This is a complete Aquarian point of view. It's not the king that has the power in Capricorn, but in Aquarius it's the laws, it's the laws that are important. For as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king, and there ought to be no other. His pamphlet sold the equivalent of 35 million copies in 1776, in our time. And here's another outsider that comes, Marquis de Lafayette from France. He came and to help Washington's army. He became really like a son to Washington. And he was an outsider, but he had another feeling of freedom, this expression of freedom that was so important in this transition from Capricorn to Aquarius. Suddenly, you know, the Aquarius wants more freedom from the totalitarian position. And then he went back to France and tried to get the French Revolution going in the same direction the American Revolution. It didn't quite happen. He ended up in prison. But he did come back to America and saw Washington, I think, just before he died. So during the transition from Capricorn to Aquarius, is what we're talking about, you had this governing body was running the revolution, but the drafting of the Constitution was in May to September 1787. Aquarius wants laws to be the government policy to prevent tyranny, just as Thomas Paine wrote. And that's what we're seeing now. And here we have Pluto and Aquarius, and what happened here, we have the U.S. Constitution, the convention in May of 1787 to revise the Articles. You know, we have a very sacred document here. It comes back to the Magna Carta of 1215 when the lords were fed up with John's, you know, using them and not giving them enough power. So all our English Bill of Rights is part of it. You know, the Founding Fathers were very smart people. They were very well educated. They'd gone to France, they read books. Not everybody had gone to France, but they read books. They knew what the English law was all about. And therefore, during the age of Aquarius, 250 years ago, we had the Constitutional Convention and the Constitution of the United States. And we also had the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. When the First Amendment of the Constitution shall make no respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise of abridging the freedom of speech or press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. This is the First Amendment of our Constitution. It's the one that we base everything on, that we the people of the United States have these rights. And it's interesting because James Madison, who was a Virginia had they had very strong individual right principles. They were very much for that, and he couldn't get his delegates from Virginia to pass the Constitution unless he promised them that he would put in those Bill of Rights, the first 10 Bill of Rights. And so when those got put in, it only applied to the federal government, because the Founding Fathers were so tired of having British overlording them. They had left Europe because of that, because they'd gotten religious persecution by somebody who was their overlord. So these first 10 amendments only apply to the federal government. The federal government cannot deprive a citizen of the United States of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of right to address. Eventually, when we passed the 14th Amendment, these Bill of Rights began to be applied to the states and local governments. But in the beginning, it was only to protect the citizenry from the over-abuses of a too strong federal power. So here we are up to now. So 2008, Pluto enters Capricorn, and here we go with the, Citizens United. So it's not we the people anymore like it was with Pluto and Aquarius 250 years ago. It's now we the corporations. Okay? I mean, this is like a thing. And I didn't realize this, but the case began when there was a conservative not-for-profit that wanted to air and advertise a film critical of Hillary Clinton running for president. But the Supreme Court said campaign contributions were protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. That has become, the bane of our existence for these past 20 years. There's a little, it's been entrenched in American oligarchy. If anyone objects to the union, you're out of luck. I now pronounce you forever citizen united. The PAC, the unlimited money in elections, corporations, and all the fat cats behind. It's really not American at all. So, and also we have this great accumulation of the corporate power. 8 large media companies in this country are owned by the billionaire class. If you read any of, all of the, and that's what's different than 250 years ago, because we had more free press 250 years ago, but we don't have it so much anymore because the corporations have gotten so big that it's like an octopus, and they're all owned by the same group of people, and we don't have any independent press anymore. It's something that at the age of Aquarius is going to have to remedy. We're going to have to figure out how to get more independent press back. We had this horrible situation with the subprime mortgage crisis. So how many hundreds of thousands of people lost their houses, and not one banker, not one legislature, not one regulator was ever sent to any kind of arrested or anything. And this is one of my favorite slides. Our President Eisenhower, when he was leaving, made this very famous Sun was conjunct Pluto that day, January 17th, of the Pluto in the United States' chart. Pluto in the United States' chart is in 27 Capricorn, corporate power in the second house. And you can read the whole thing, but in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. This is January, when he was handing over the presidency to John Kennedy. And if you want to read further, Paul Kennedy, no relation to President Kennedy, had wrote this book, Rise and Fall of Great Powers. And every power in the world, every government controlled, has fallen apart when the military got too big. And this book demonstrates that, if you're interested in what's happened before, when all the militaries in each country have gone their disastrous rise of misplaced power. We had this during COVID, the censorship of government and anything except in the government narrative. We had this in the Kennedy files were supposed to have been, 10 years ago, they were supposed to be completely unsealed. And it haven't yet, because all the presidents now, their government is hiding something from us. And if you really want to read about this, Practically Unspeakable, this is James Douglas's book about JFK, why he was killed and why it matters. This is a little bit about conspiracy. It derives from the Latin con, together, and to breathe together. So the earliest known usage was by an American author in a letter in January 11th, 1863, during the Civil War. They used it to refer to claims that British aristocrats were intentionally damaging the United States during the American Civil War in order to advance their financial interests. So we've heard a lot about conspiracy theories going on and who's doing the conspiracy. It's kind of very nebulous ground we're in. But the conspiracy theory itself was the CIA's term used when nobody believed the Warren Commission about the JFK assassination, what was going on there. And the CIA, the government, said, oh no, you're just conspiracy theorists because you don't believe with the Warren Commission. Well, you know, there was another hearing about the JFK assassination. It was in the 70s in the Senate, and they did confirm, they did realize it was a conspiracy. And since then, there have been at least 20 people that have come forward, including one not that long ago, an FBI guy who admitted that he took the bullet from the car and put it on the trolley and everything. So this is still unresolved in the American psyche, and still is something that, because Pluto's in Capricorn, that I expect to see somehow get resolved. That all of the files, which should have been unleashed, all the people are deceased. They're concerned with the files, but why is the government holding back? This is a little slide which I showed before about the 2020-2021. This is a French astrologer, André Barbeau, who wrote in 2011 forecasting a period of the lowest point in cyclical index. It can even be geophysical disasters, but pandemics. He actually predicted a pandemic in 20 to 2021, and it would also be a geophysical disasters. And he published this in 2011. And this is he takes the planets and he correlates the space between the planets at different times. And he comes up with this graph of what's happening in the world based on that. And here we were, this is 20 and 21 was down here. Yeah. About 20, 21 was right at that nadir, the trough. So better times are ahead. I imagine we're coming out of something. So that's the inspiration there, the hope there, that we're coming out of this pretty severe decline in moral, ethics, cultural, social. And censorship is a big deal. And this is Jeffrey Tucker. He wrote this piece in the Epoch Times. Did you know that in the last 3 years, and probably dating back some years before, all the mainstream social media platforms were spying for the government and curating what posts you see based on regime priorities? I certainly did not. Like most people, I trusted the platforms. We are here to serve you and not the deep state bureaucrats. It's a question we all have to hold these days. The information I'm reading, where does it come from, and who's paying for it? But it's nothing new. Shock to corruption. William Jennings Bryan was a fabulous progressive who ran for president in around 1900 during the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was when you had the Carnegies and the Mellons and the Vanderbilt having these huge monopolies. They made enormous amounts of money. Mrs. Astor, she had a party in New York for 1,200 people. She spent as much money as could have, with that money she spent on the one party, the one night, she could have fed 1,000 families, farm families, for a year. And there was such disparity in those, this is the Gilded Age, that's why it's called the Gilded Age, because what was happening on the front to those huge mega barons was completely different from what's happening to the little people. And Bryant went around to the country and tried to ignite the the soul of people to wake up, what's happening. Unfortunately, the McKinley was also running, and he was Republican, and the Carnegie gave $50,000, $50 million. I don't know, but he gave a huge amount of money to McKinley. All of the big Republican, super wealthy people gave money to McKinley. McKinley won the election. But this was a little, this has happened before. That's what I'm trying to say in American history. That's what I'm trying to say. And this was a very interesting, what happened this summer, right, with the federal judge in July 4th. I don't know if you know about this, but there was a preliminary injunction barring the White House and 11 federal agencies including the FBI, the DOJ, CDC, BCH, and trying to get social media companies to censor people. And this is what the judge said about this ruling. Now, it's been contested. You know, they're going to keep on going and fighting court about it. But if the allegations made by plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in the United States history. The plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. The government has been gaining too much power. And that's what happens in a Pluto and Capricorn situation. Whatever it is, whether it's the Pope or whether it's the English monarchy, he gains too much power. Each United States, this is also part of the judge's ruling, each United States citizen has a right to decide for him or herself what is false and what is true. The government has no right to determine the truth. And that's a very important principle in terms of this switch between Capricorn and Aquarius, that we all going to have to learn to think for ourselves about what's true. This is just a little thing. Capricorn is very inward. You know, they want to keep everything to themselves, and you get Capricorn. Aquarius is more outward. So Pluto is in Capricorn now until January 22nd. It's going to go back in Aquarius from January 22nd until September 3rd. So next, from the first of the spring of 2024. And then it goes back into Capricorn one more time until November 20th. This will be after the election, which is interesting. It's going to go back into Aquarius and stay in Aquarius. So I'll run through these. Amending the Constitution. We're going to be looking for that when Pluto's in Aquarius, because Aquarius rules laws. They want fairness. Aquarian age. This is about what we're going to be doing about expecting the Constitution is going to have to be revised. We have the student debt forgiveness program. There's a whole group of students that are coming together to try to oppose anybody in Congress who's against giving this loan. In my day, when I took a loan out, it was 2% of go to college, and I paid it back. But now it was the government loan. It wasn't the bank's loan. The government gave it over to the banks. So this is another sign of the transition, is the people power is getting stronger. There was a Democracy for All amendment introduced in the Senate back in January, and this is the, that is the back, the map of all the nationwide support for amendment that overturns Citizen United, a law in Congress. They can do it. They can overturn the Supreme Court's rule if Congress makes the law, the amendment, to overturn it. And this is as of May of 2023. This is where we're at. And the states, it's one way to ratify the Constitution, is each individual state has to decide they're going to do it, or ratify it. They want to propose the amendment. They're going to support it. This is John Adams' quote about, because power corrupts society's demands, because power corrupts, society's demands for more authority and character increase as the importance of the position increases. The more power you get, the more moral authority you ought to be holding, and not the other way around. John Adams. Can we trust the legacy media? I don't know what it said there. Oh, this is more signs that the Bank of International Settlements and the European Parliament is upset about these globalists they're so in meth, they have there's no accountability on any part. And China's leading the way. In China you have a passport and you have to have credits, and if you don't have the right credits, and social credits, if you've done the thing wrong, you don't get to use your own money. You can't go places. And that's what some of these big globalists are trying to bring here, which we would not like to see, because America, we're freedom. Can we trust the media? Not necessarily. We have a CIA that has spends $27 billion now and owns 100 TV stations around the world. That's what our money is going for with this current regime. We're primarily responsible for the ministry and the civilian. This is from Wikipedia. Budget of over $27 million. Only in the world accounts for more than half of all U.S. foreign assistance, the highest in the world. Newspapers, it's our propaganda about the world. Instead of helping little people, we're amassing great power. So these new ideas, we got to get places, new ideas. Aquarius, the little symbol of Aquarius is these wavelengths, the wires. What's in the internet? What am I listening to? What am I tuning myself to? You know, what is the vibration around? What am I listening to? And this is from an astrologer, Demetra George. And how do I build up this intuition? Because part of, remember, he's a water carrier. So our intuition has to grow as well, our own intuition. And this astrologer, Demetra George, said how to develop your own inner voice. If you're going to have critical thinking and decide for yourself what's true, how am I going to do that? You know, I need to develop my own intuition, my own spiritual practice, and this is Demetra George's, research or her advice about how to do that. You know, the researching in the brain, the positive power of positive thinking, the altered states of consciousness, divine inspiration, rituals and prayers, developing that sense of interconnectedness with God, with your own spiritual development, so that you're tuning into the higher, I don't know if you can call it higher, but wherever the new ideas from. Because if we're all in the same mindset, we've got this in our brains are, the synapses of the brain are in ruts. So for all of us to get into the Aquarian age, we're going to have a little bit more of an opening on the top of our head, and we're going to get new information, new ideas. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to say that. This is all more about the censorship industrial complex. I don't have to go there, it's too depressing. But I just wanted to almost end here with this business of the ladder and the difference between the Capricorn and Aquarius. And that the point of Aquarius is that a power shift to the people from the entrenched or overreaching corporations. This is seen the ever-increasing. We see this, as I say, the labor movements, all of the female protests, the mandates protests, everything, all over the world, the individual people are waking up. Astrologer Patrick Watson says to expect to see more transformational, nonconformist, abstract theorists and anti-heroes. Is technology ahead of humanity? Are the tech corporations amassing too much power over society? That's a big question. We're going to have to get laws to help regulate them. But if the politicians are bought by the corporations, if they're staying in power because of the money of the the massing of the power, okay, then you get my drift. So Sean Nigard said that this time in Pluto and Aquarius, when the center cannot hold, it's from a poem by William Butler Yeats. So when the focus shifts from the time of the papal hierarchy, English monarchy, corporate boards, and federal government to that of outsiders, those on the edges and margins of society, is becoming the focus. Just like we saw when Washington, someone from the outside is going to come in and help spur, just like Martin Luther, who was a lone monk. He started the Protestant Reformation. Pluto and Aquarius represent some of the most profound times in history when the center, be it personal, psychological, culture, governmental, political, financial, or otherwise, is unable to hold. Here's the horse running off the merry-go-round, carousel. They're running away. That's what our brains have to be doing now. And this is an interesting piece. With Takwa.com, my sister sent this to me. Tony Serba, this is in Saudi Arabia. This is an interesting, if you go online, it's a YouTube thing. It's about technology, and because Aquarius is about technology now. He said, when Apple and Microsoft began the smartphones, it was the technology gotten to the point that they both did that at the same time. It was disruptive, completely disruptive, the smart. So did the electric cars. But he says that the systems which hold us together no longer apply. The new disruption occurs. The new system has not stabilized yet. And this is for someone who's not an astrologer at all, but he doesn't know anything about Capricorn Aquarius. He's thinking about what's going to happen with the electric vehicles and what's happening with energy and what's cheaper. And he's talking to all these Saudis in the room, the entrepreneurs. And this, you can read his book, The Clean Disruption, what's going on. He really feels we're not going to have any fuel cars, oil cars by the 2030, and the wind and solar and battery, we need a little battery. He has a whole theory of it's going to be cheaper for all of us, and it's going to be better. And it's amazing what's going to happen. Just like in the next 15, 20 years, we're going to see very, very rapid change. And part of it is we have to kind of catch up with that. I've said that several times. The difference, I'm almost coming to the end here. I know you're very patient. It's a ladder going up, and Capricorn is linear time, but Aquarius has no time at all. Everything happens all at once, all together. And that, it seems to me in my life these days, everything is, every day is completely different, and when I wake up in the morning, I have no idea what's going to happen in the afternoon. So there's a difference in with the vibration, because we're going from one to the other. It's kind of disarming, or it's alarming. Capricorn is earth building, concrete ideas, social structures without looking below, and Aquarius is the air. Cannot see and think of the internet, rejecting social conventions and standing outside and looking in, and that's where the disruption is going to come from, the outsiders, the people that are not part of the system. Part of the system, they're entrenched, they're going to stay there, but it's in order for Pluto and Aquarius to actually fulfill itself, you're going to have someone from the outside. And this is the last slide. This is an interview with Seymour Hersh in July. What I mean is that all of our great historical moments of progressive reform have been due to huge social movements that enlisted ordinary people by the millions, not just the professionals in DC. I'm thinking of the farmers' movement in the 1890s. This was an amazing movement, this man named Coxley, and he got all these farmers together. They marched to Washington hundreds of miles. This was during the Gilded Age, and they wanted to petition. They wanted the government, they had specific problems. We want to work. There's no work. We just want work. Please, the roads are in bad shape. Just give us jobs. He had ideas, and he bought this whole band of farmers. These people couldn't feed their families. Things were very dire in the 1890s, worse than now. I don't know, from where I stand, but they got to Washington D.C. and Coxley got arrested for standing on the lawn in front of the White House, and he was beat up and he was put in jail. And he never got to give his petition to Coleridge. He wouldn't see him. The president wouldn't see him. So whether it's the farmers' movement, what's the matter with Kansas? That's the book, Kansas, because he came from Kansas. He walked from Kansas to D.C. It's a fabulous, book. What's the matter with Kansas? So whether it's the farmers' movement in the 1890s, the labor movement in the 1930s, the civil rights movement, and then the anti-war movement in the 60s, social movements succeed. They build and they change the intellectual climate. And then, when crisis comes, they make possible things like agrarian reform or the New Deal, the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s. So it's us people getting together, and that's what Aquarius is all about, to counteract the built-up, the too much corporate, too much federal, too much control from above, and our voices need to be heard. So I encourage you all to, get your voices heard. Thank you so much for coming.